We have all heard endlessly in schools of separation of powers, that the governance of the United States is divided into at least 3 compartments, one an executive compartment, one a legislative compartment, that further divided into 2 compartments of its own, and finally a judicial department. Now, a little bit of reflection should show you what the purpose of that is. Not that we all live in harmony and agree in times of trouble with what to say and do, but exactly the opposite of that. That the only possible way to arrive at an approximation of truth is through argument. The more skillful the argument on all sides, the better for the ultimate resultant of truth. So that people who appear before you in the media and say, in this time of trouble, dissent is not wanted, are truly un-American, because this country was the world's first laboratory of dissent on the part of everybody. That's really what the American dream is largely composed of. The ability to speak your mind in a public forum. So that kind of understanding, which is kept under close wraps in public schooling, is examined minutely in these elite private boarding schools. There are many, many other working engines of our institutions that we're not allowed to understand. I might contradict myself and give you one more. The military, which is quite an expensive institution to maintain, even in times of peace, is always constituted at the fraction of 1 to 1.5% of the entire adult male population. Never heard that before? That was a rule or a principle worked out in Prussian Germany several hundred years ago. Now your homework is to find out why that fraction, but I'll give you a clue. The prison population of the United States is very close to the military population of the United States, and that fraction too was worked out in Prussian Germany about 200 years ago. So you should expect the teachers that impact on your kids to be aware of these things and hundreds more like them, and to make that the meat of their contact with kids. And if you're homeschooling, do your homework. And that's not meant to be sarcastic. You'll grow each time you add one of these concepts to your own mental base. The fourth thing that private schools do, or elite private boarding schools do, that public schools hardly touch, are the repeated exercises in the forms of good manners and politeness, based on the utter truth that politeness and civility is the foundation of all future relationships, all future alliances, access to places that you might want to go there. Now don't tell me, well, that's just common sense, because any public school I've ever been in, and I've been in hundreds, is a laboratory of rudeness, cruelty, sloppiness, coarseness. The fifth thing that private boarding schools emphasize is independent work. Think again about the possible reasons for that. In public schools as we know them, the teacher is charged with about 80 to 90% of filling the time available, one way or another, and all the choices of the teachers. But in independent private boarding education, that ratio ideally is reversed. It probably never is completely reversed, but the weighting is shockingly different. The kids do most of the work. They're expected to do most of the work. They're expected to be resourceful enough to use the work of other kids also, not in public school. The sixth principle is that energetic physical sports aren't a luxury or a way to blow off steam, but they're absolutely the only way to confer grace on the human presence. And that grace translates into power, into money later on. I was talking to David yesterday about the perception of George Washington as a very average mind among his own contemporaries, but nobody said that his physical presence was average. Washington, in his diaries, tells us that the two most important things that made him George Washington were deliberately selected. One was horseback riding, and the other was ballroom dancing, because it conferred a commanding physical presence on the person who could do those things well.